In the fourth stage, the child has moved well into the toddler stage. This is a time in which they're wanting to develop their freedom to play, to explore, to express themselves. Their language is starting to really come through now. They start to move further and further away. They become further away from elders and parents and teachers. They become more self-confident, more assertive, a lot more assertive. And they need not to be overprotected, to be allowed to take a few bodily risks, to climb up on furniture, to jump up and down, to jump on the puddles, to run, to move away, to try all kinds of things, to pick things up, to play with them, to explore. Of course, that means that parents are then demanded of to maintain an eye on them, supervision, so that they don't so that the child doesn't do something too risky, but not in an overprotective sense, which will very stifle them and fill them with shame. They need support to express their big emotions. As I was saying earlier, the part of the brain that regulates emotion and transmutes it into speech is not fully developed until 3, 4, 5 years of age. That's why little children, when they're angry, frustrated, they can have enormous tantrums that sometimes go for half an hour, 45 minutes. In the past, parents would blame, berate, judge, and even punish little children for having tantrums or for crying too much, for crying too big. Now we can understand that this is beyond their control at this age. Neurologically speaking, it's beyond their control. So they just need the understanding. It doesn't mean allowing behavior in which they can hurt each other or themselves or hurting you. But it means not shaming them for their big emotions and sometimes offering them comfort after a tantrum. Sometimes little toddlers they're afraid because their emotions were volcanic. They couldn't control themselves and they need to be held. They will collapse on your shoulder and they need the soothing. The greatest strength and healing power that a parent, elder, teacher can have is to listen to the child's feelings, to validate their feelings and needs. Again, I will say this doesn't necessarily mean saying yes to their behavior. There are many behaviors that we must say no to. And this is the time of life in which children begin to need very clear behavioral boundaries. Clear, but without punishment or shaming. Punishment or shaming a child for their behavior is wounding, and it has a very, very long-term negative impact. So that being assertive as a boundary setter when we're parents or teachers, being assertive with our little child is nothing like being punishing or shaming. We don't need to punish or shame in order to say no, in order to say stop, in order to say to our child, I'm really worried if you keep on doing that, that will be bad for you, or that will be bad for somebody else. So that at this age, the child's behavior becomes so much more important. And of course, the capacity for empathy, the empathy centers of the brain are nowhere near fully developed. They can be very caring and empathic in 1 minute, but very insensitive the next. And that's so normal for children. It's important to understand that. So when little toddlers hurt one another, which is very normal, so that we intervene strongly without shaming them, without punishing them, which can feel so crushing. So when the emotional needs of this age are well met, children grow up able to be assertive, able to be courageous, able to enjoy their own company as well as other people's company. So very, very self-confident. And they grow up able to have a very playful attitude to life, a very playful attitude to learning. Whereas when there's a lot of guilting, a lot of shaming, or a lot of stifling overprotection at this age, children can grow up saddled with guilt issues, with very inhibiting shame, afraid to speak up, afraid to take risks, afraid to show their gifts and their talents in public, or perhaps very submissive, very pleasing to others. Too pleasing. Difficulty in being true to themselves. A final need that I want to mention is for learning to be play-based. When children are helped to and allowed to play in their learning, their focus is much better, their stamina for learning is much deeper, and their ability to absorb new information and remember it is much, much longer. Play-based learning is a much happier approach to learning, much healthier and free of shame and coercion. At roughly between the ages of 3 to about 7, I say very roughly because the stages overlap, begins the 5th stage of development, different to previous stages in some key ways. I like to call it the passion stage, which children need freedom to express their passion. They become very, very passionate. They love with enormous affection. They climb all over their parents. They adore each other. They adore their family. And they express this in a very, very physical way. And they need that protected. They begin to discover at this time of life the pleasure that they find in their genitals. It's like the nerve endings become awake and alive in a new way. And almost all children will want to touch themselves. It brings them great pleasure. They need to not be shamed, humiliated for that, but at the same time to be gently taught about the importance of privacy, so that they really learn to protect their own bodies, to be the masters of their own bodies, to understand the notion of boundary, that their body is for them, not for somebody else. Very important in terms of their long-term safety. It's also a time of mateship, where they need time to choose who will be their buddies. And they bond very, very passionately. They fall in love with their mates, their best mates. They need access to the group. The right to privacy, the right to dominion over one's own body. And a continuation of play-based learning. The most powerful kind of education takes place in a learning environment in which the child can choose what they want to learn at any given time, and to have opportunities for the learning to be playful. And playful is not always noisy and loud and ha ha ha. Often a sense of playfulness can be quite quiet and focused. But playfulness is about the child's flow. And in essence, it means that the child needs space to have choice about what to learn and how to learn. Learn things that are true to the child's passion. This is how children can grow up with a very, very powerful sense of commitment commitment to relationships, commitment to work, and the freedom to really express warmth, love, and affection, which is so important for building strong, joyful families, communities, and society. Children that are very wounded emotionally at this stage can sometimes, as an adaptation, develop a sense of emotional rigidity, a sense of insensitivity, like an armor that protects their wounded heart. Through roughly about the primary school ages, this is what psychologists refer to as the competency stage, where it becomes so important to children to feel like they're good at things. And the other side of the coin is that they are very, very sensitive to feeling ashamed of themselves in the process of learning new skills. And so much of their daylight hours are about learning. We're in school now, studying, absorbing new skills for the world, learning what our gifts and our talents are. So learning is a very, very vulnerable time. It's easy to become inhibited and ashamed in the early stages when we don't have competency. And that's why children are very, very sensitive to grading, ranking, comparison, the pain of being marked, of being judged in the classroom and school. Children really need an empathic quality of mentorship. It's crucial that they not be afraid of making mistakes, because the only way that we can learn or create is by feeling comfortable about making mistake after mistake after mistake after mistake, so that learning should be playful. It should be exhilarating. And again, the kind of learning journey that children most need is so that it's led by the things that they're naturally passionate for. Children should not all be learning the same thing at the same time. As much as possible, and I do understand that schools have their limitations and the state-based curricula, but as much as possible, when a child is learning, to be given at least some freedom about what to study, how to learn, in a way that addresses their natural passion, which is the strongest engine for learning. When our learning is passion-driven, our stamina is enormous. There is pleasure in learning. Children are insatiable about learning, actually. And we retain information. Plus, we think much more critically. We focus much better. How good is it to train a child's body and nervous system to love learning, to want to continue to learn for the rest of their lives? And they need our assistance with peer communication skills, because their sense of peer group is really starting to grow right now. Their sense of themselves comes from belonging to a friendship group. And human relationships are challenging, filled with negotiation. Your turn, my turn. One for you, one for me. Subject to so much conflict. So adult assistance and mentorship for how to communicate feelings appropriately so we take care of each other, and how to listen to each other with empathy. How to be aware of the impact that we have on our friends in our environment. Adult mentorship. When the competency needs of a child are well addressed, or well enough addressed through the primary school stage, we grow up with so much confidence and a love of learning. Confidence in ourselves, unafraid to make mistakes so that we can move forward. Unafraid to deploy our skills. When children are wounded at this stage, they carry a lot of shame into the adult years, which can be very inhibiting. In the workplace, it can fill us with a lack of confidence and a fear of progressing and learning, keeping us unnecessarily small. The seventh and last stage of childhood emotional development is adolescence, starting around puberty, roughly 12 years old, and stretching all the way into our early 20s. Through adolescence, the brain, the frontal lobes in particular, are growing at a very rapid pace. We're going through great, profound changes. We're vulnerable to our environments. And that brain growth really settles into a new plateau at roughly 23, 24, or 25. So adolescence stretches beyond the teenage years. What do we need emotionally, primarily, as adolescents? This is a time of expressing opinion, which is why adults have some difficulty with adolescence. We tend to get a little irritated. Adolescents want to be opinionated. This is the kind of the prototype of expressing their intelligence out in the world. They're rehearsing this and they're very vocal about it. And instead of being humiliated, put down, made to feel silly, even if we disagree with them, to at least protect and support their right to form a worldview. We might disagree with them, but that doesn't mean having to crush their early efforts to form their worldview and to express intelligibly this worldview to others. A great drama of the adolescent years is social belonging and a sense of identity, where we start to gravitate towards like-minded individuals. We start to get a sense of ourselves through the identity of our group. That's a very, very powerful drama that's going on through the adolescent years. We need the pack, we need the tribe. And we continue to need the right to express our passion through our learning, to seek the vocations that are in line with our natural gifts and our natural propensities, our natural loves, to move towards the vocations that we love, that give us most meaning. If these things are supported, we grow up sociable, able to move in and out of group, able to negotiate relationships so well. And this is the stage of life in which we really start to learn about self-responsibility, that we have the ultimate say over our destinies. We start to, so long as we have the emotional support according to what we need at this stage, we really start to move into a sense where it's no longer about blaming the adults or blaming the world for how things are, that we start to get a sense of our own agency, that we contribute to creating the outcomes of our society. Okay, through the way that we contribute, through our voice, the things that we express in the world, through our talents and our gifts. When at this age we're not given opportunities and helped with opportunities to choose our friends, when we're not given mentorship about how to navigate the rough waters of relationship, how to communicate, how to listen, when we don't have good role models for listening, when we're told to be quiet, that our voice doesn't matter, that we're silly, and when we're not given opportunities to follow our hearts in our educational journey, we begin to isolate. We become reactive against society. We grow with a sense of low self-worth, or we miss our calling altogether. We end up in careers that have little or nothing to do with our true strength and our true loves. And there are a few things that are more health-giving than when we've been supported to learn what we want to learn and to choose vocations that give us the greatest sense of personal meaning. That is the greatest protection from depression, anxiety, and even illness later in life. So those are the core fundamental developmental needs, and you can see how they change at each of those 7 stages. I'm hoping that you were thinking about your children as well as how you fared during those stages. Which of those needs were met well for you? How did that impact you? Which of those needs were not met sufficiently for you? How has that impacted you? And in other words, what healing might you need to complete that developmental phase for you? Remember, I was saying earlier that it's never too late for healing. This is also true for your children. If some of your child's needs weren't fully met when they were a baby, and those are the needs for holding, for very deep listening, for great sensitivity, it's never too late for a person, your child, or even you as an adult, to receive that later on in life, and so on and so on. The same with all of the other core emotional needs. For me, where this story gets most exciting is that we can change the way societies work. We can change the world by making sure that every child has not only their physical needs and cognitive needs met, but their psychological, emotional needs, their core emotional needs. This has a transformative impact on the way that a society behaves, because a society is made up of individuals. So that we bring more love, more strength, more harmony of relationships into the workings of our societies and our world. And now this has been the consistent finding of psychohistorians and anthropologists and social psychologists, social researchers, consistently around the world, that the way children are customarily looked after and raised, the way that their emotional needs are met en masse, is the strongest determiner of the way that the society will behave 1 or 2 generations later. The strengths, the beauty, as well as the weaknesses or vulnerabilities of that society, so much to do with the way children were raised. Understanding developmental needs is a window into the future. It puts in our hands as adults, parents, teachers, grandparents, elders, it puts in our hands, in a sense, the program, the operating system for the future of our societies. All of this research you can read about in my book, Parenting for a Peaceful World, which has been translated most beautifully into Chinese. I thank you for your attention.